Hey guys, CB Super here. We're going to go straight for the editing tab just to make things a little bit easier. On this far left pane over here, we're going to go ahead and right click and create a new bin. A bin is where our footage is going to live. First off, we're going to title this. Footage, and this is where we're going to upload all of our footage. So with this selected, I'm going to go over to the right here in this bin, and I'm just going to import media. Twirl it down, import the media. I'm going to go to wherever my footage is located, and I'm just going to import a few clips here. You'll notice that this will pop up very often, if not all the time. The clips have a different frame rate than the current project settings. We didn't actually establish any project settings, so there's a good chance that it's not going to be correct. So we're just going to go ahead and change it, which means that it's going to change whatever the project settings are to match whatever these clips are, which most of these clips are 1080p 24 frames per second. And that's kind of what we want to output to, so that'll work. Under this, I'm also going to create one more bin, and I'm going to just title it music. Even though I'm only bringing in one song, it's just get in a good habit of creating bins for all of your assets. All right, then I'm going to come over here, twirl down, and I'm going to import media again. This time I'm going to go to wherever my stock music is, and I'm just going to open it, and it's going to load it in there. So you'll notice that when I start scrolling on this music, it's going to be fairly loud. So if it's too loud, I can always turn the speaker volume down over here on the right. For now, we're just going to leave it as is. I'm going to come over to the footage section. Since this is a quick tutorial, I'm just going to get right into editing. One thing you'll notice is if I grab one of these clips, I can left click, hold down, and just drag it onto the timeline. And once I drag it onto the timeline, it's going to snap to the beginning of this playhead. And the only reason it's snapping is because I got this little magnet turned on, which is the snapping key. You can also use the hotkey of N. So if I turn this off, you'll notice that it doesn't snap anywhere, and it's a lot smoother, and I can move my playhead around freely, and it won't stick. Versus if I have the snapping on, when I move it, it's sticking. It's sticking to that playhead. It'll also stick to the ends of other clips, which can be very handy, but sometimes it can also be annoying. So you're probably going to be turning this snapping on and off quite frequently. So just get familiar with the hotkeys, and the hotkey for snapping is N. So I'm going to go ahead and Control-Z or Command-Z just to undo that. And I actually want to talk a little bit about ins and outs. So just like any other editing program, we're going to want to create an in point and an out point. And you can actually double click on any one of these clips to enter it into this pane over here, which is going to be a little bit easier to work on. So once it's double clicked, now I can move this playhead, this small playhead. I can scrub through this clip in its entirety, but I don't want this entire clip because it's too long for what I'm going for on this one. I can use these buttons to play through. I can stop it. I can have it play slowly in reverse. I can go to the very first frame. I can go to the very last frame. I can also add in points and out points. And by doing that, I'm going to make it into a much smaller clip. So I want to start my in point right here. I'm going to go ahead and press this little key. I can also use the hotkey of I, which is in, and the hotkey of O, which is out. But for now, I'm just going to click on this button, which is the mark in. I'm going to play a little bit forward, right about there. And now I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to mark an out point. Now, when I grab this clip with my left click, hold down, and drag it onto the timeline, you'll notice that I have a much smaller clip now. I also have snapping turned off, which it'll be a little bit easier for when I'm assembling to leave snapping on for now. So there's my clip. If I press the space bar, it'll start to preview, and you'll see it over here on the right pane. Now the right pane is going to play whatever's on the timeline. The left pane is going to play whatever media is selected. So if I select a different media and double click it, now you'll notice that the two panes are different. I can actually scrub through over on the postage stamp on the left, and when I do that, I can actually add in an in point or an out point from here without even having to come over to the actual other editing pane. I can add in an in and add in an out, and I can actually grab the postage stamp and I can move it onto the timeline and snap it into place. That's a second way to edit. I can also double click on this next file and I can move the playhead. I can put in an in point, let it play a little bit, put in an out point, and instead of dropping it directly onto the timeline, I can move it over here to the right and it'll drop it wherever. If I want to insert it, it'll insert it to wherever the playhead is. So currently the playhead is on the first clip down on the timeline. If I insert it right now, it's actually going to drop it in between that clip. So you'll notice that it split this clip, and it split it by putting another clip inside of it. That's not exactly what we wanted to do, but just know that if you do use the insert, it's going to put it wherever the playhead is. So we're going to go ahead and Command Z to undo that. And this time, we're going to move this back over to the file, and we're going to try an overwrite. Now, overwrite is just simply going to plop it down wherever it is, but it's going to plop it down on the same channel. So now you've overwritten on top of another clip. Again, that's not exactly what we were going to do. So we can do a replace, we can do a fit, we can place it on top. Placing it on top is just going to put it in another channel above it. But notice that you won't be able to see whatever is below it. On video, you won't be able to see, you'll only be able to see the topmost clip. Now, there's different things like blending modes and effects, and we'll get into that much later. But for now, just notice that if you put a clip on top of another clip, you're probably only going to see whatever the clip is on the top. Audio is not going to work like that. Audio is just going to add cumulatively to each other. You're going to hear more audio. Some will be louder and some will be quieter, but that would only be because you recorded it louder than maybe another audio. So again, that's not exactly what we were looking to do. In fact, I want it just to be at the very end. Now, I could put my cursor at the end and it will snap there, and that would probably work, but that kind of takes a little bit of time. I have to move this playhead. Instead, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to grab this clip over here, move it over to the right, and this one at here, it's called append at end. And that's just going to drop it no matter where the playhead is. It's going to drop it at the very end of my timeline. And that's the one you're going to probably use more than anything for simple edits when you're doing a linear editing fashion. Okay, so I have 3 edits in here. I'm going to go ahead and play through them just to see if I like them. So that clip is a little bit long. I noticed that right away. So the rest of this is okay. I like the length of the overall video, but this clip in the center just feels a little bit long. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a slip and slide tool, and I'm just going to move it over to the right a little bit just to even out these clips to make them all right around the same length. Now, this isn't how you normally would want to edit, but since I don't really care how these clips match up with each other, it's going to work out for the purpose of this video. And I really just want to show you the slip and slide tool. If you use the slip and slide tool, you're going to slip it into and slide it around. You're actually editing 2 clips. You're editing the clip to the left and you're editing the clip to the right. You're making the clip to the right longer while making the clip to the left shorter. So it's replacing it with the front of the other clip. So sometimes you might want to do that, sometimes you might not. Say if I wanted to just make this clip a little bit shorter, I can use the trim tool. So you notice you'll kind of have to hover around. If you're at the very end, you'll get that slip and slide tool. If you hover just a little bit inward, you'll get a trim tool. Now you'll notice that you'll see a highlighted box. Well, that white highlighted box is the entire clip in its entirety. So the full length of it. So I wouldn't be able to extend this clip past the clip itself. So in this case, I just want to bring it in just a little bit, just to make it a little bit shorter, and now play. And so I like the length of those clips is much better. It needs a little bit of audio though, so I think I'm going to put that music in. So I already decided that I like this song, and by looking at the waveform, I can tell that it starts off a little quiet. Starts off a little slow. I got to double click actually to load it into the viewer. Otherwise, it'll just keep playing the same, whatever I loaded last into it. All right, so I've added some ins and outs because this song starts off a little bit slow. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my snapping again. So when I move this file, it actually will bring it in right to the front, which is where I want it to start off. Now, you'll notice this clip is a little bit long. I could scroll all the way to the right, use the trim tool to pull it in, or I can use another tool called the blade tool. The blade tool is located right here on the toolbar, but you can also just press the hotkey of B. Now, if your snapping is on, it's going to snap to other clips that are right above it. And this is very useful, especially for when you're trimming music, just to make it a little bit easier on yourself. Now, when I want to go back to the selection tool, I can either come back here and click up here, or I can just press the hotkey of A. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight the rest of that music and delete it just to get it off my timeline. And now that I have some music loaded, I can go ahead and press the space bar to preview it. So what we've done here is we've loaded up our clips onto the timeline. We've created a small sequence of just 3 clips and added some music to it. But we need to export this. So we're going to skip these other panes for today and go straight to the Rocket for delivery. Now, generally speaking, when you're going to export something and it's going to go anywhere other than YouTube, you're probably going to want to come in here and you're going to want to mess with these settings. You're going to change your format, your codec, your resolutions. You're going to change it to whatever your client wants. But we're not doing that. We're actually just going to YouTube. And if you twirl down here on this little arrow, you'll notice that even on the free version, they give you several different options of 720, 1080p, and 2160p. Now, most of our footage is at 1080p, so we're going to leave it at 1080p for YouTube. Now, this is going to automatically give you other settings that are already downloaded. But first, we need to give it a different file name. We'll call this test. We'll browse to find our location, which we don't want to put it in movies. We're actually going to put it in our test project folder. We're not going to mess with the resolution and format or video codec, because that's what, when we clicked on YouTube, that are the things that got loaded into there automatically. So it's going to be the best. It's going to be the best format for what we were wanting. Now, if I was to come over here, I have all my settings the way I want it, but if I come over here and I click Start Render, nothing's going to happen. So I have to add this to the render queue. If I don't add it to the render queue, the queue doesn't have anything to draw from. So once it's added to the render queue, we can go ahead and start the render. It's going to go super fast because we don't have any effects. We don't have any blurs. We don't have any crazy visual effects that are taking place. So the computer is able to render it very quickly. So it's done. We can actually come over here and we can view our video now, which... Alright, so that's the end of the video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions or if you want to see other tutorials, please leave it down in the comments. Thanks. Have a good day.